There's a version of this man that the world knows by heart. The easy grin, the big boots, the voice that can fill a stadium and somehow still feel like it's singing just for you. There's the man who stood on the stage of The Voice for over a decade, who turned heartbreak into chart toppers, who married one of the most famous women alive and made it look like the most natural thing in the world. And then there is the other version, the one that doesn't make the highlight reel, the one that sits in a quiet room at 3 in the morning, wondering what his body is trying to tell him. What do you do when the machine that carried you to the top of the world starts to show cracks you didn't put there? What happens when the invincible cowboy discovers that some battles don't have a guitar solo to get you through them? And what exactly did the doctors find that even his closest friends didn't see coming? Stay with this story, because what happened to Blake Shelton at 49 is not what anyone expected, and the truth of it will change the way you see him forever. Ada, Oklahoma, is not a place that shows up in many Hollywood stories. It sits in the southeastern corner of the state, a town of maybe 17,000 people, surrounded by red dirt roads and blackjack oak trees and the kind of sky that goes on forever in every direction. It is a place where people know your name at the gas station, where Friday nights belong to high school football, and where the idea of being famous means something different than it does in Los Angeles or Nashville. In Ada, being known means your daddy's name still carries weight. It means people remember your grandmother. It means the roots go down so deep that even when the storm comes, something holds. Blake Tollison Shelton was born on June 18th, 1976, in this exact town, into a family held together by music and hard work and the kind of stubborn Southern love that doesn't always say the words out loud, but shows up every single time. His mother, Dorothy, played piano and sang in church. His father, Richard, ran a used car dealership. There was never excessive money. There was never the absence of it either. What there was in that house on a quiet Ada Street was sound. Music lived in the walls. It came from the radio on Sunday mornings, from his mother's hands on the piano keys after dinner, from the records his older brother Richie played in his room with the door cracked just enough for a curious younger boy to press his ear against the frame and listen. Blake was that younger boy. He was the one who absorbed everything. He had the kind of childhood that looks simple from the outside, but is quietly building something enormous on the inside. He was tender-hearted under the roughness, sensitive under the bravado. His older brother Richie was his compass, his model for how to be a man in the world. Richie was funny and fearless and full of life in a way that some people are just born carrying more light than the rest. Blake watched him with the particular awe that younger brothers reserve for those they secretly want to become. He got his first guitar at 12 years old, a birthday present that changed everything. Not in the dramatic movie trailer way, in a quiet way, the way that something true enters your life and simply never leaves. He taught himself chords by sitting on the edge of his bed for hours, pressing his fingers against the strings until the calluses came and the music finally started sounding like music. He wrote his first song at 15, not a masterpiece, but real, his own. That guitar became a living thing in his hands. It became the place he went when the world got too loud or too confusing. That guitar was where Blake Shelton went to tell the truth. By 16, he was performing locally. By 17, the dream had a shape and a direction and a destination. Nashville. He could feel it pulling at him like a current in a river he hadn't quite stepped into yet. And then, just as that future was beginning to crystallize, the world shifted underneath him in a way he could never have prepared for. He was 14 years old when his brother Richie died in a car accident. 14, the age when everything is already too large and too confusing, when the emotions don't have the vocabulary to match them yet, when you need every anchor you have just to stay upright. And Blake Shelton lost the one who was supposed to be there first, the one who was supposed to pave the road, the one who carried more of Blake's future inside him than either of them ever knew. There is no way to fully describe what it does to a boy to lose his older brother. There is no metaphor clean enough, no sentence long enough to hold that kind of grief. But you can see if you look carefully at the man Blake became. You can see the way he holds certain silences, The way he gets quiet when people talk about loyalty. The way he speaks about the people he loves with a particular urgency. Like he has always known that love is not guaranteed past any given Tuesday afternoon. Richie's death did not break Blake, but left a mark on him that never fully faded. It changed the temperature of everything that came after that he moved to Nashville at 17. His mother took him. She drove him there, helped him find a place to stay, and then she did the hardest thing a parent can do. She left. She drove back to Ada and trusted that the boy she raised would find his way. Blake had $80 in his pocket and a guitar on his back and a grief he hadn't finished processing and a dream that was larger than anything else he owned. He was a teenager in a city full of people who all believed they were the next great thing. Most of them were wrong. Most of them would go home within a year or two, quietly folding the dream and tucking it away in a drawer. Blake Shelton was not most of them. The early Nashville years were lean and unglamorous and real. He worked odd jobs. He wrote songs that nobody recorded. He knocked on doors that didn't open. He sat in rooms full of people who were politely uninterested. The rejection in the music industry is not violent. It is quiet, and it accumulates. It is every unreturned call, every meeting that goes nowhere, every showcase where someone looks at you and nods politely and then turns away. Blake collected those moments. He held them, but he did not let them define him. He found a mentor named Bobby Braddock, a legendary songwriter who had written some of the most iconic country songs of the 20th century. Braddock heard something in the tall Oklahoma kid that was worth nurturing. He co-wrote Austin with Blake, a song that would eventually become the launch pad for everything. But that was still years away. First came more waiting, more rejection, more of that particular silence that follows a dream deferred. The lowest point arrived not with a dramatic crash, but with a slow accumulation of pressure that finally became too heavy to carry quietly. By his early 20s, Blake Shelton was not famous. He was not successful by any visible measure. He was a young man in a city that didn't particularly notice him yet, carrying the loss of his brother, carrying the weight of a dream that wasn't happening on the timeline he'd imagined, living far from the red dirt roads that had shaped him. The loneliness of that period is something he has spoken about carefully in interviews over the years, never fully opening the door but letting a little light out through the crack, that he was also, during this time, beginning to understand something about himself that he wouldn't fully reckon with until much later, that he used personality as armor. The jokes, the easy laugh, the self-deprecating humor, all of it was real, but it was also a wall. It was the way a man from Ada, Oklahoma, learned to protect the tender parts, the parts that still missed his brother, the parts that were scared the dream would die in this city that didn't yet know his name. And then, just before you think the story might end here, just before the wait becomes too much, something shifted. A door opened. Not all the way, just enough. Austin was released in 2001 and it went to #1. Just like that. A song about a phone answering machine, about holding on when someone has already let go, about the kind of love that doesn't know how to quit. It resonated with people in a way that neither Blake nor Bobby had fully anticipated. It stayed at the top of the country charts for 5 weeks. 5 weeks. Blake Shelton was 24 years old, and suddenly, people knew his name. Not just in Nashville, not just in Oklahoma, everywhere. The relief of that moment is almost impossible to overstate. Not just the career validation, though that was enormous, but the deeper thing, the confirmation that the years of waiting, the $80 and the grief and the quiet rejection had not been wasted, that the dream was real, that he had been right to stay. What followed was a decade of building. Song after song, album after album, tour after tour. Blake Shelton became one of the defining voices of modern country music. His range was remarkable. He could do the big, swaggering bar anthems, and he could strip it all back and break your heart in 3 minutes flat. He won fans not just with his voice, but with his personality, which translated effortlessly to television when he joined The Voice as a coach in 2011. That show became something nobody had predicted for him. It revealed dimensions of Blake Shelton that pure music stardom never quite could. His warmth, his humor, his genuine investment in other people's success. Audiences fell for it completely. He won the Voices competition 4 times in its first 5 seasons. He became the breakout personality of the show, the one people tuned in for even when they didn't particularly follow country music. He was funny and real and occasionally ridiculous in the best possible way. He seemed, from the outside, to be a man who had found exactly the life he was supposed to live. But here's where the story takes the turn that everyone missed. Because while the cameras were rolling and the ratings were climbing and the awards were accumulating, Blake Shelton's personal life was quietly fracturing. His first marriage, to Kaynette Williams, ended in divorce in 2006. His second marriage, to Miranda Lambert, one of the most celebrated pairings in country music, two massive talents building a life and a sound together, ended in 2015 in a divorce that felt, to the public, like the collapse of something that was supposed to be permanent. The announcement hit country music like a thunderclap. Fans were blindsided. The industry was blindsided. And Blake Shelton, who had built so much of his public identity around loyalty and authenticity and Southern values, now had to figure out how to stand up inside a story that felt like it was telling a very different version of him. The tabloids were brutal. The narrative was cruel. He was not the innocent party in every retelling, and he knew it, and the weight of that, the weight of public failure layered over private pain, was something the jokes could only partially conceal. There's a version of this chapter that gets glossed over because what came after was so visibly joyful. But to understand Blake Shelton at 49, you have to sit inside this moment for a minute. You have to understand what it cost him. The man who had built his career on songs about love and loss now had to live one of those songs in real time, with cameras everywhere and opinions multiplying by the hour. He has said, in various interviews across the years, that this was the period when he had to make a serious decision about who he actually was and what he actually believed. That the easy deflection of humor wasn't going to be sufficient. That something real was required. What came next surprised even the people who thought they knew him best. Gwen Stefani entered his life at precisely the moment when both of them were at their most undone. She was also navigating a painful public divorce, also rebuilding, also figuring out what came next. They were coaches together on The Voice, and the friendship that developed between them in the hallways and green rooms of that show was, by all accounts, the kind that neither of them was looking for and both of them desperately needed. He's described falling in love with Gwen Stefani as the thing that made him believe in the story again. Not in a greeting card way. In a specific, grounded, this is a miracle it did not earn way. They went public as a couple in late 2015, and the response was immediate and divided. Some people found it romantic, others found it incongruous. The country cowboy and the pop icon with the platinum hair and the decades of reinvention behind her. But the thing that came through every photograph, every rare interview where they discussed each other, every moment when the cameras caught them off guard, was the specific quality of their ease together. They seemed, genuinely, to make each other laugh. They married in July 2021 at his Oklahoma ranch. He brought her to the red dirt roads and the big sky of the place that had made him. He brought her to the land his mother still lived on, to the soil where his roots still ran. And something about that, something about the man from Ada, Oklahoma, finding his way back home through the most unexpected love story, felt like the completion of a circle that had been open for a very long time. Blake Shelton turned 50 in June 2026, but the year leading into that milestone, the 49th year, the year of quiet reckoning, was the year that the story took a turn that even his closest friends were not entirely prepared for. He began speaking publicly about his health with a candor that was new for him. The jokes were still there, but underneath them, something more serious was moving. He spoke about fatigue that wasn't resolved by rest, about changes in his body that he had initially dismissed, in the way that men of his generation are trained to dismiss such things as simply the price of getting older. He talked about a visit to his doctor that began as routine and ended as something considerably less routine. The details that emerged through his own carefully chosen words through reporting from people close to him, painted a picture of a man confronting his physical mortality with the same combination of humor and honesty that he had always brought to his emotional life. There were concerns about his hearing, which had taken damage over decades of loud music and louder crowds. There were conversations about cardiovascular health, about the cumulative effect of years of hard touring and high stress, and the kind of lifestyle that the music industry does not exactly discourage. There were the quieter conversations, the ones that happen between a patient and a doctor in a small room with no audience, where the questions are blunt and the answers are not always reassuring. What the doctors revealed, and what Blake Shelton eventually chose to share, was that the body he had carried through 50 years of life, through grief and failure and triumph and love, was asking him to pay attention in ways he had not always been willing to do. That some of the warning signs had been present for years. That the invincibility he had always projected, the big-voiced, big-hearted cowboy who seemed built to last forever, was like all human invincibility, a story rather than a fact that he did not collapse. He did not retreat. He took the information, sat with it in the way that a man who has sat with hard things before knows how to do, and he began to change. He spoke about changing his diet with the particular exasperation of a man who loves cheeseburgers and has been told that this relationship must evolve. He spoke about sleep and stress and the importance of slowing down with a humility that was coming from the man who once seemed incapable of slowing down, quietly striking. He talked about what Gwen meant in this context. Not as a caretaker, but as a partner who had made him want to be present for the long run in a way he hadn't always prioritized. That he also talked about faith. Not performatively, not as a talking point, but as the thing underneath everything else, the foundation that had been there since his mother played piano in Ada on Sunday mornings, since the first guitar rested in his 12-year-old hands, since the loss of Richie taught him that nothing is promised and everything matters. He talked about trusting that the years ahead could be different from the ones behind. That taking care of yourself was not weakness, that it was, in fact, the bravest thing he had ever been asked to do. Because here's the truth about Blake Shelton that the highlight reel has always obscured. He is not the effortless golden boy. He is the man who lost his compass at 14 and rebuilt himself from scratch. He is the man who failed publicly and chose not to disappear. He is the man who drove to Nashville with $80 and a broken heart and refused to let the silence of rejection become the final word. He is the man who finally found the love story he deserved and then discovered, just as everything felt settled, that the next challenge was waiting. Not outside him, inside. That guitar he picked up at 12 years old has traveled every mile of this life with him. It has been in the hands of a teenager learning to tell the truth through music. It has been on stages in front of 50,000 people. It has been in the quiet of an Oklahoma night when no one was watching and the grief was still fresh and the only honest thing available was a chord change and a line that came from somewhere deeper than performance. It has been present through all of it. The instrument is not separate from man. The music is not a career. It is the language he has used to survive. What he is teaching us now, in this 49th year, in this honest reckoning with his own human limits, is that there is a next chapter available to people who are willing to look clearly at where they are. That the same courage required to walk into Nashville with nothing is the same courage required to walk into a doctor's office and really listen. That reinvention is not only for the young. That the man who arrived in Ada as a grieving teenager, who left Ada as a dreaming young man, who left Nashville as a star, is still arriving somewhere, still becoming something, still in motion. And now is when this story turns to face you directly. You have been sitting with this story, following this man through the red dirt roads of Ada and the shining indifference of early Nashville and the devastating privacy of real grief and the improbable beauty of second chances. You have watched him pick up a guitar at 12 and carry it through everything that followed. You have seen what it looks like when a person refuses to let the hardest moments become the defining ones. That S.O. here is the question this story is really asking you. Not about Blake Shelton, about you. When did you last pay attention? Not to the performance, Not to the version of yourself that you show to the people who are watching, but to the actual physical and emotional truth of what your body and heart are telling you right now. Because the thing that nearly undid this man was not a scandal or a failure or a heartbreak, those he had always known how to navigate. The thing that nearly undid him was silence. The decision, made daily and unconsciously over years, to dismiss the small warnings, to push through, to treat rest as weakness and vulnerability as inconvenience and the doctor's visit as something to schedule later, always later, never quite now. He picked up that guitar at 12 years old because something in him recognized that the truth needed somewhere to go, that the feelings didn't just disappear because you didn't acknowledge them. That life required an instrument. Maybe yours isn't a guitar. Maybe it's a conversation you've been postponing. Maybe it's an appointment you keep rescheduling. Maybe it's a person who loves you and has been asking you, quietly, with their eyes, to show up fully rather than functionally. Maybe it's simply the practice of sitting still long enough to hear what you are actually experiencing beneath the noise of everything you are managing. Blake Shelton at 49 is not a tragedy. He is not a cautionary tale. He is something more interesting and more useful than either of those. He is a man who got honest at exactly the right moment. A man who let the guitar remind him, one more time, that the most important songs are the ones you are brave enough to actually finish. What story are you in the middle of? And are you brave enough to really listen to it?